Hi, everyone. This is Savvy Psychologist. I'm Dr. Ellen Hendrickson, and every week I'll help you meet life's challenges with evidence-based research, a sympathetic ear, and zero judgment. I am really excited to talk with this week's guest, Dr. Jeannie Safer. First, because she has been on the show before, so this makes her the first repeat guest on the show. She's been on before to talk about relationships, and she was a fan favorite. She is wise and insightful and just delightful to learn from. But second, I am really looking forward to today's topic, which is political mixing, having friends, family, or even a partner who holds very different political beliefs from your own. And in this realm, Dr. Safer knows what she is talking about. She's been a psychotherapist in New York City for 44 years and is a veteran of a politically mixed marriage. She is a liberal Democrat married to a conservative Republican. And not just any conservative Republican. Her husband is senior editor of the leading journal of conservative opinion, National Review. But together, they've learned to deal with their gigantic political differences on issues from abortion to gun control to assisted suicide because they agree about almost everything else. And that is more important. In addition, Dr. Safer is the author of 6 books on taboo topics, so what many people think about, but nobody talks about, like choosing not to be a parent, problem siblings, positive effects of a parent's death, the fact that forgiveness isn't always necessary, and the many varieties of love. Her new book, I Love You, But I Hate Your Politics, based on 50 interviews and her own story, will be published by St. Martin's Press in spring 2019. And if you can't wait till then, and who could, her new podcast of the same name, I Love You, But I Hate Your Politics, is out now. So check that out wherever you like to get your podcasts. So with all that, Dr. Jeannie Safer, welcome, or should I say welcome back, to the show.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be talking to you. You know, when I hear you talk about this marriage that happens to be my marriage, I think, how do they do it?
I should talk to those people. How
gun
do they
control, abortion, assisted suicide, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
I'm sure. Well, and it sounds like you guys have figured something unique out because, for instance, I saw there was a new Pew Research Center survey that came out recently, and it found that almost half of liberal Democrats, so I think it was 47%, said that if a friend supported Trump, it would put a strain on their friendship. So what do you make of this trend of not maintaining friendships with, much less dating or marrying people with different political stripes?
I think it is insane. I think it is insane because, first of all, we assume that because somebody has the same politics as we do, they're compatible in other ways or their values are the same as ours. And, it is a compelling idea on the surface, but it's absurd. I mean, when I think about the men that I was involved with before I met Rick, which was almost 40 years ago now, they all agree with me exactly politically. Now, that was not exactly a guarantee of being treated well by anybody. So we have to remember that. And I mean, if your friendship is only based on politics, what have you got?
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things, that's been so striking to me over the years is I've kind of become, in certain ways, the liberal mascot of National Review magazine, with which I agree about nothing. Okay? And I have found that the people that I've met through there have supported me, have been good friends, and it's been a real education, which I was kind of forced to get, because there I was. But I'm so glad about it because otherwise I would have been like every other liberal almost, which is to only be in this little world. And it's gotten worse.
Absolutely.
Over the years. I mean, I've got a wonderful statistic about mixed marriages, mixed political marriages. When Rick and I got married in 1980, the percentage of mixed marriages was 20%. Would you like to know what it is now?
Oh my, it must have, how much has it shrunk? I'm sure it's gone that way.
Well, when I looked at this statistic, which was about a year ago, it was 9% and going down.
Okay. Yeah, that
so
makes
I think
sense.
we may be the only surviving politically mixed couple very soon, which is just absurd. I mean, unless you were just totally obsessed with politics, there's an awful lot else in life. And one of the things that I have to say is a wonderful moment, though, is that Rick doesn't like Trump. to put it mildly.
Mm,
So, and not everybody at National Review is a Trump supporter. So
sure.
it's really nice to be, I understand how nice it is to be able to talk about politics for the first time in my life because we could do it now, but here I interviewed 50 people, and these were all people in couples who had various kinds of couples. I mean, parents and children,
Mm-hmm.
old friends, siblings, husbands and wives, gay partners, all kinds of people. And they were really struggling with this. They did things that seemed, when you thought about it, just guaranteed to be a disaster,
Mm,
like having a fight and raising your voice.
okay. Right.
Anytime you raise your voice, the other person assumes you're yelling,
Yes, of course.
and they stop thinking, and you're done. I mean,
And
you
then you
can't
get
talk.
defensive. Right. Right.
Yeah, and everybody does it. Even psychologists like us do it. I mean, so there's that. And also, one of the things that I found in a lot of these people is they do a terrible thing, which I call article thrusting.
Mm,
Can you guess what that is?
tell me.
That is that at the breakfast table, your mate
Ah,
finds a copy of, whatever it is, and you expect them to read it. You demand that they read it. They haven't asked for it.
yeah. So it's this intrusion.
Yes, it's intrusion. And, sometimes I have a number of couples, wise couples, who were mixed, including two old friends, two guys in their 60s and 70s who just are the symbol and the model for everybody. The one said to the other, well, look, if there's an article I'd like you to look at. Would you read it if I send it to you? And of course, I'd be happy to read something that you send me.
Mm, very
This
different.
is one person, yeah, that did this. And the other thing that people make a disastrous mistake about is that they look at their partners or whoever's feed on Facebook, you name it. And this is a disaster.
Mm. So how do they deal with that? Or would you recommend just not doing that, not looking at the feed?
I recommend not doing it. I mean, there's something about our current world that the notion of don't do something seems to be like, gee, how can I express myself if I don't do something? You know what I mean? And it's so absurd. I mean, if I said, well, do you read your partner's diary?
Mm.
You know, most people would say, well, no, I don't do that. That wouldn't be a good idea. But do you read your husband's Facebook feed when he's a big Trump supporter? Well, yeah, sure. And then the other thing with the internet that is really awful is that people unfriend people,
Mm-mm. Yes.
at the drop of a hat. But I mean, parents and children.
Wow. And they still have to live together, or if they're adult children, see each other regularly.
Yes. Well, they see each other a lot less, and they
Mm,
yell a lot more, and
mm.
it's unbelievable and sad. Like I can't tell you the number of people who were unfriended or who unfriended that I talked to, and those are hard things to fix.
Yeah. Okay, so what I hear is if you want to share your opinion, to do it in a respectful way, to not do the article thrusting, to
And also
ask.
ask the other person if they
Yeah,
want to hear your opinion.
that
Because,
that makes sense.
if you've got an audience, that if you have civility together, I mean, it's interesting to hear other people's opinions. I've learned a lot about, I talk to a lot of Trump supporters that I would be glad to have as friends, even though, because they had a lot of interesting opinions and thoughts. So if you ask for it,
Yeah, I want to look on both sides of this. So one, you mentioned political beliefs and values as separate. I think a lot of people would say that political beliefs and their values are fundamentally intertwined. How do you see them as different or the same? And is it possible to be close to someone whose values, we fundamentally disagree with?
it's the most important question. And I've pondered this a great deal. And I'm thinking, here, I support these things that passionately, and my own husband, whom I love, doesn't. Well, I have a test that people have to follow now, have
Okay.
to pass in order to be considered somebody who has the same core values that I hold dear. I call it the chemotherapy test. Who stands by your bedside when you get a
Mm,
chemotherapy? And do you
okay.
ask them their political registration when they're standing there?
No, no, you don't. That goes
Well,
out the
Rick and I
window.
have both been through that, and I could tell you that's what counts. And I have a whole chapter in my book about what is a core value and how people who really fell in love with people who have very different beliefs in many ways, how they felt ultimately that their core values were the same. Because it's decency, it's sensitivity, it's taking your side, being there for you when you need them. I had a very interesting example of it. A young woman that I know, and I know her family, they are way to the left of me. They live in upstate New York in the town of New Paltz, and that's a place where there are a few Trump supporters, but mostly they're people who Bernie was probably kind of too right. Anyway,
wow.
So she has a lot of relatives. Her father, who died about a year ago, had, I think, 6 siblings, and they were very left. And she also was in a group of women who talked about politics every other week for years. She had one uncle who had become a born-again Christian, who lived in a different city. Would you like to guess who helped her?
Oh, wow.
When her father died, none of her uncles and aunts who agreed with her raised a finger. And her friends, who she met every other week, sent her condolences on Facebook.
Nobody showed up.
Nobody showed up with anything. And they had a house to take care of. They had a business to deal with. I mean, and this guy who lived in a different city and had 5 children made a point of coming not once, but many times.
Wow.
And that really changed her mind.
So there, the values are how you treat other people, how you treat the people you love.
That's the fundamental, I think, because, it takes a little bit of thinking to say, well, but my goodness, if you really are pro-choice and somebody else isn't, well, but aren't they damaging you, or aren't they damaging women, or whatever? But the thing is, what I've really had to learn because of my life situation is that people can disagree. I mean, not everybody who disagrees with me is somebody I want in my life.
Sure.
I'm not fond of the alt-right, or InfoWars or things like that, but that's a whole different thing.
That's a different story.
It's a different thing. That's just craziness, or Charlottesville people, thing like that. But a lot of these people, I find a lot of commonalities, and I've also I understand through knowing them why they have some of the beliefs they have, which are anathema to me. They have them for decent reasons. No, I don't want them imposed on me.
Right.
But they've come through for me. And maybe that's a selfish way to think about it. If somebody treats me well, that's what counts most. But I don't think it's a bad criterion, because the other criterion, of somebody who agrees with you politically doesn't really hold up.
Yeah, I think it comes down to respect. I think that's why you can not want to get close to somebody who is alt-right, or, like you mentioned, Charlottesville or InfoWars, because I think that fundamentally is not respectful and not decent. And,
absolutely.
And so, but if we are defining the common bond as decency and respect, then that makes a lot of sense.
And you do have to think about it, because, look, are most of my close friends liberal Democrats? Yes, of course. And I'm glad to have them, particularly since I can't talk about it at home. But I learned this again through a lot of personal experience. My next door neighbor, who's a card-carrying National Review reader, very, very devout Catholic. I can't say that we agreed about one thing, but she insisted on coming to the hospital with me. She left me a note every day under my door to encourage me.
Oh.
And I really thought about this, and it really changed something for me. It was personal experience, and one that really made a difference to me. And I'm very glad that it did, because otherwise I would have been in a much more limited world. And I think I would have seen things too much through the lens that a lot of people see it, which is, if you vote this way, you're good. If you vote that way, you're bad.
Well, that brings me to the next question. So what are we losing out on when we don't engage with people with different values, when we do stay in our bubbles? What do we miss out on?
We miss out on the spectrum of life, and we also may miss out on people that we could really love and who love us. That's the thing. I remember when I met Rick, we happened to meet in a Renaissance singing group. And in fact, we actually sing a madrigal on one of the podcasts.
Oh, that's adorable.
Decently enough that we aren't embarrassed by it. But when I met him, I asked him what he did for a living, right? And he said he was a writer. I thought, oh, that's good. Okay. Who do you work for? Then he says, William F. Buckley at National Review. I said, oh my God. And I said, and then my third thing was, well, he is a writer, and he had wonderful blue eyes and he had a great voice and he was 6'4" and I'm 5 feet tall and lots of other stuff. So, it didn't give me enormous pause because his personality is what really was the first thing. And also, this is very important, we had music together. That this was that, and a kind of slightly esoteric kind of music that we both loved and sang. He'd run a group at Yale and I'd sung for years. And so when you have something like that in common, who you vote for doesn't matter quite so much.
That makes sense. Okay, so now back to Dr. Jeannie Safer and how to discuss politics with your political opposite. So here I have a question. So when we are discussing, or okay, well maybe the answer is just simply don't discuss it. But if we do want to discuss differing political opinions with people we love, what do you recommend to manage negative emotion like outrage or indignation as we talk? How do you do that?
Well, I think the way you couch the questions and how you listen is really what makes the difference. If you go in with saying, how can you do this? You're done for, right?
Yes.
But actually, Rick and I had found a way mostly to do it. Some things we avoid.
Sure.
Abortion, we have decided through long, painful experience, we cannot discuss.
Okay. Just off the table.
No.
Yes.
Off the table. He knows how I feel. He knows why I feel it. I know why he feels it. End of story. Gun control, kind of the same.
Okay.
But I could say things like, well, what's the Republican policy on such and such? Or how do they deal with this or that? You do it in a kind of more abstract way. And actually, I'm married to a political journalist, an analyst, and he knows an awful lot about politics. And I've actually been educated by that.
That's a nice way to see it.
But you have to think about how you talk. But the thing is, don't you have to think about how you talk to anybody to some degree?
This is
more
true.
than you really do. There's a lot of things that you could say to somebody that you agree with that would annoy them or infuriate them or whatever. But my favorite story of two people who did it wrong. Well, two. One was two people who both voted for Trump, who got in fistfights over Trump. That was one.
Goodness.
I know, right?
No fistfights. Yeah, okay. Rule number one, no fistfights.
A couple, these were an older couple. They were both highly educated, and they had this beautiful big house. And she was quite liberal, and he was a conservative. And he liked Fox News, which is not, it's not, maybe not our taste, but it's not vile necessarily.
Sure.
Anyway, he liked to record it in the basement. They had 3-story house.
Okay.
She would not let him listen to Fox News in the basement of their 3-story house. I said, what is it going to pollute the air? I mean, like, 3, 4. And he went along with it.
Oh.
He went along with it.
To get along? Go along to get along?
Yeah, I guess so. But
okay.
I thought, and I said to them when I met them, I said, no, this isn't right. He shouldn't be. He said, well, I don't listen to a lot of it. He's like trying to placate her. And I said, look, on the 3rd floor, you can have your own enclave there, and he has a right to listen to that.
That's true. That's true.
And do you feel that your own values are so vulnerable that you can't
fragile,
allow?
yeah.
He's not sticking in her face.
Right.
But that was the most amazing story I heard.
Well, here's a question. Maybe we can wrap this one up for listeners who may not live with somebody who have very differing political opinions, but may encounter like Uncle Al at Thanksgiving dinner, or the conservative friend from college who, when they're in the same city, they have dinner together. How do we manage people who are not on the same page in terms of respect and asking questions and being curious? How do we manage the article thrusters or the, well, what about, the people who try to obfuscate?
Yeah. Well, you're asking two important questions, really. How do we try to have a conversation with somebody who disagrees, who's a decent person?
Yes.
And how do we try to deal with somebody who isn't a decent person?
There you go. Yes.
I find that with the decent people, I try to make it abstract and think, what's your position on this, or how are they dealing with this? The same kind of thing I do with my husband. And sometimes I simply don't answer. Sometimes I just do not engage. I remember recently Rick was speaking someplace and we were at a dinner. I was the only liberal at this, which is an experience I've had more than once.
Sure.
You can imagine. That's why I call myself the mascot. And there was a man sitting next to me. He was a retired general, brilliant guy, who, by the way, a friend of his for 60 years stopped talking to him because he voted for Trump.
Oh, my goodness.
Anyway, he started talking to me about what he thought about abortion. I did not bring this up.
No, okay.
I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything.
Just listen.
I listened and I went on to something else.
Okay. Did he notice that? Did he notice that you didn't engage?
Well, he was a gracious man, so he didn't say, "Well, what do you think about this?"
I see. Okay.
He gave his opinion, and I said something else about something else, and that's what I did. And we have a number of friends, the people who sponsored this dinner, who were both Trump supporters. And they know they kind of think I'm amusing. Okay, that's fine.
You add flavor.
Why should I get into this?
Right.
But the other kind of person, I have an interesting example for you from a side that surprised me. One time, a number of years ago, Rick and I were invited to a brunch for psychoanalysts. So this is my world, not his world.
Okay.
And somebody walks up to us, a colleague of mine whom I didn't know well, and said, well, Jeannie, what's it like to be married to a crypto-Nazi?
Oh, my. Wow. That's inappropriate.
And Rick laughed it off.
Okay.
And I said, you have no right to say that about my husband.
Good for you.
So I believe in that situation, it happens all the time. You must defend the person you love.
Mm-hmm.
That is a requirement. You don't have to put up with somebody saying something to you that's hostile and obnoxious about you either, of course. To say,
no, sure.
I really can't countenance that opinion. I can't talk about this with you. You just say it like that.
Mm-hmm. Very matter
of
factly.
At least that's what I try to do. Very straightforwardly, not screaming, not yelling, not you should be thrown out of the country. But no, that's not an acceptable thing to say. Or I really don't believe or agree with that position. Let's not discuss it. If you have to be stuck with the person for a while, if they're next to you at dinner,
right?
You're sitting next to one of these jerks at dinner. You find some other way to do it. But actually, the guy, the general. There were lots of things to talk about. I'd never known a general before. I was interested in a lot. I didn't care if he voted for Trump.
You're interested in his life and his experience.
Anyway, I hope that's interesting
Absolutely.
to our listeners.
Yes. Well, and this is actually a perfect segue because if listeners want to hear more, and I hope they do, they can check out your new podcast, which is out now. And it's called I Love You, But I Hate Your Politics. And of course, they can get it wherever they like to get their podcasts. And there you talk with politically divided couples about how they make their relationships work in today's political environment. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Both how they make them work and also about some of the fights they've had.
Ah.
Almost all of these people have had problems.
Sure.
And, being at one of this couple's house on election night wouldn't have been someplace you wanted to be.
Oh, my.
But they talked about how they dealt with it.
Yeah.
So it's been a revelation to me. And it's very encouraging and inspiring to see that people with a goodwill and who really love each other, whatever their relationship is, really can work this out if they think about it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to live in separate worlds.
And I'm sure that we, as listeners, and you as a writer, learn more from the fights that they talk about than the peace. So that, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It's been very illuminating, and also listeners are encouraged to talk about their own fights, or even come on the show if they have a fight they want me to adjudicate, which I have been doing.
Very good. I'm excited. I'm excited to hear it. Well, thank you so much for talking with me. As always, this was lovely.
Ellen, it was great to talk to you about this. Thanks for having me on. I hope your listeners enjoy it.
I'm sure everyone will. I know I loved talking with you. Thank you for making The Savvy Psychologist a part of your life. As always, Savvy Psychologist is strictly for informational purposes and doesn't substitute for mental health care from a licensed professional. If you haven't already, check out my book, How to Be Yourself, Quiet Your Inner Critic, and rise above social anxiety. You can pick up a copy wherever you like to get your books. And thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you here every Friday for, as always, a happier, healthier mind.